Hey there, Benjamin from Loves Data here, welcome back. In this video you'll learn everything you need to get started with Google Sheets. This is my Google Sheets tutorial for beginners. Google Sheets is a great way to create and store spreadsheets, and because it's part of Google Workspace, all of your spreadsheets are automatically saved, easy to share, and can be edited whenever you need. Google Sheets even integrates with a whole range of other Google products and third-party platforms. Today we're going to start with the basics. We'll look at how to create a spreadsheet, formatting, using basic formulas, sorting, and how to share our spreadsheet. Okay, let's get started. The first thing you'll need to do to start using Google Sheets is create a Google account. If you already have a Gmail address or a Google Workspace account, then you can use your existing login to access Google Sheets. You can then head to Google Drive at drive.google.com or directly to Google Sheets at sheets.google.com. Personally, I prefer Google Drive since I like to see all of my spreadsheets and documents in a single view. If you don't have a Google account yet, then you can select the option to create an account and follow the steps. If you already have an account, which I do, then you can log in. And we can see I've opened Google Drive. Now let's click New and select Google Sheets. We've now created a new spreadsheet. We can see the spreadsheet is currently called Untitled Spreadsheet. So let's click this and name our spreadsheet My Example Spreadsheet. At the top we can see the main menu. Then we have the spreadsheet. The spreadsheet can be made up of one or more individual sheets or pages. You can create additional sheets when needed. For example, you might have all of your raw data in one sheet and then your formatted data in a separate sheet. It will just depend on what you're working on in Google Sheets. Each sheet is made up of rows and columns, and we can edit each cell in the sheet. For example, we can start entering values into each cell. However, in most cases, you'll probably want to import existing data into Google Sheets. I'm going to import an example spreadsheet, and if you'd like to follow along in your own account, then you can find a link to download my example in the description below this video. Okay, so to import an existing file, let's select File, and then Import. This lets us view files that we've previously uploaded to Google Drive, along with files that have been shared with me and recent files I've used. But we're going to select Upload. We can now drag and drop the file, or we can click the button to select a file. I'm going to click Select, and then I'm going to choose the example file. Now that the file has been uploaded, we have some different options we can choose from. We can see that by default, Google Sheets will create an entirely new spreadsheet, and Google Sheets will automatically detect how columns are separated in the file we are uploading. Let's select Create New Spreadsheet. We can then see we can choose to insert the file as a new sheet, so a new tab in our existing spreadsheet. We can replace the current spreadsheet, replace the current sheet or tab, append the file to the current sheet, or replace the data at the cell we currently have selected in our sheet. Let's choose Insert New Sheets. And we're going to leave the other default settings and click Import Data. We can now see that a new sheet has been added. Let's double-click the name of the sheet and rename it Members. We can see the example spreadsheet includes some basic details for some sample members. Our spreadsheet is made up of 5 different columns. These include the name, email address, status level, revenue, and joining date for each member. We can see that each column is represented by a letter, so the first column is A, then B, and so on. Then we have the rows. These include details for each individual member. Each row is represented by a number. We can see the first row is 1, then 2, and so on. The row and column can be used in combination to refer to a specific cell or range of cells in the spreadsheet. For example, if we just wanted to reference the first member, this would be cell A2. Or if we wanted to reference all of the available revenue values, this would be D2 to D14. Our example only has 14 rows including the header row, but if you have more rows in your spreadsheets, then it can be helpful to freeze the header row so that it's always visible. To do this, we just need to drag the grey bar on the left so that it is below our header. Now when we scroll, the header will always be visible. We can see some of the values included in the cells are being cut off. In this case, you might like to wrap the values so that they are visible. Let's start by selecting all of the cells in our sheet. We can do this by clicking the top left corner. Now let's select Format, and then Wrapping. And let's choose Wrap. We can now see that the cells expand to show all of the information they contain. Personally, I prefer to adjust the column widths, so let's change this back. Let's select Format, then Wrapping, and Overflow. Now I'm going to adjust the size of the columns by clicking the dividing line between the cells and dragging them so that all of the information is visible. Google Sheets will automatically format the data included in your spreadsheet. You can also change the formatting. Let's select the first row that contains the header. We can now make the text bold. Let's select a dark color for the background of the header. And let's change the font color to white. Now let's adjust the formatting for some of the cells in the spreadsheet. Let's select the cells in the revenue column. We can do this by clicking the first cell, holding down the Shift key on our keyboard, and then clicking the final cell in the range we want to use. We can then select Format, then Number, and then Currency. Or we can simply select the currency symbol in the secondary menu. We can also remove the decimal places. Now let's change the formatting of the dates. Let's select the cells in the Joined column and choose Format, then Number, and Custom Date and Time at the bottom. We can now choose from additional formatting options or even create our own formatting. I'm going to select the option that shows the day of the week, followed by the month, day, and year. Now let's click Apply. We can change the order rows are presented in our spreadsheet using sorting. For example, if we wanted to sort this sheet based on the dates members joined, to do this, we hover over column E and select the small arrow on the right. We can then look for the Sort Sheet options. If we select Sort Sheet A to Z, then the dates will be sorted in ascending order with our earliest members first. And if we select the small arrow again and choose Sort Sheet Z to A, then our newest members will be listed first. Okay, now we're going to look at conditional formatting. Conditional formatting can help highlight particular cells and values in your spreadsheet. Let's start by selecting the cells in the revenue column. Now let's select Format and Conditional Formatting. The Conditional Formatting panel opens on the right, and we can use this to control how the cells will be highlighted. Let's choose the Color Scale tab. We can see that cells are automatically highlighted in green. The lower the number, the deeper the green. Let's modify this so that we are highlighting the higher values. To do this, we can either manually adjust the minimum and maximum value colors, or we can simply select the default formatting option and select the white to green color scale. We can now see the higher values are highlighted with a deeper green. Okay, let's close the conditional formatting panel. Now let's look at some formulas we can use in our spreadsheet. Let's start by adding all of the values in the revenue column to create a total revenue figure. To do this, we need to select the cell where we would like to perform the calculation. We can double-click this cell to edit it, or we can use the formula field above the sheet. I'm going to double-click the cell. Then we need to enter the formula. Let's type equals, and then sum. This formula will let us add all of the dollar values in the revenue cells. As you type, you'll see automatic suggestions being made by Google Sheets. These suggestions can be super helpful as you're working with your spreadsheet. We can see that it is automatically highlighting the dollar values in the column. They're highlighted with a dashed orange line. It is suggesting that we might want to add all of the values from cells D2 through to D14. This is exactly what I want, so I can click this option to automatically complete the formula. We now have the total revenue value for our spreadsheet. Let's double-click this cell again to see the formula. I just want to briefly mention that sum is just one function we can use. There are lots of different ways you can work with the data in your spreadsheet. As we can see, sum will combine all of the values that are referenced, and in this case we're creating a range. We are saying we want cell D2 to D14. This is what the colon is doing. It's creating a range. Okay, I'm going to select the cell to the left and enter total revenue. And then I'm going to change the background color for these cells. I'm doing this just to clearly explain what the value is for our spreadsheet. Now let's add another function below our total revenue. Let's use a function to count the number of rows in our spreadsheet. This is useful when you're working with larger files. There are different ways you can do this, but for our example, I'm going to double-click a cell. Then I'm going to type equals, and then rows. You can now click the suggestion or press the Tab button on your keyboard to accept the suggestion. Or you can simply press the opening parenthesis button on your keyboard. This will count the number of rows in the range we enter. I'm going to enter A2 to A14. Then close parenthesis. And now I'm going to click Enter on my keyboard. We can see there are 13 rows in our spreadsheet. Now I'm going to select the cell to the left and enter number of members, so that I know that 13 refers to the number of members included in the spreadsheet. Okay, now let's do one more simple calculation. Let's find the average value for our members. To do this, I'm going to double-click a cell. And then type equals, then sum, and I'm going to enter D16, which is the total revenue value. Then I'm going to enter / for divides, and then D17, which is the total number of members. I can now click Enter on my keyboard, and we can see the average revenue for our members. But there's another way we can achieve this. Instead of referencing the D17 and D18 cells, we can change the formula. Let's delete the current formula. And now let's type equals, then average. And then type D2 : D14 and close parenthesis. This gives us the average for the cells in the range without relying on the other calculations we've performed. Now let's adjust the name column so that we have people's first and last name in separate columns. Let's start by adding 2 additional columns after column A. To do this, let's hover over A and select the small arrow on the right and choose Insert one column right. And let's repeat this one more time. Let's rename our first column to full name. And then name our new columns first name and last name. Now let's double-click the B2 cell. And we're going to use a function that will split people's names based on the space between their first and last name. To do this, let's type equals, then split, then open parenthesis, then A2. This is the cell that will be used by the function. We then type comma, then a quote mark, then a space. This will be what is used to split the text, then another quote mark, then closing parenthesis. We can now see the full name is split using the space between the first and last name. We can copy this formula to all of the rows in our spreadsheet. Let's select the B2 cell, and then we need to copy this cell. You can do this using the keyboard shortcut on your computer. Then we can select the cells where we want to use this formula. To do this, we click the starting cell, hold down the Shift key on our keyboard, and then click the final cell. We now have a range selected, and we can use the keyboard shortcut on our computer to paste the formula into all of these cells at once. When we paste the formula, we can see that it is automatically updated based on the row. This means we don't need to do any manual edits. Now we're going to use Google Sheets to help validate the email addresses for our members. Let's start by adding a column to the right of email. Let's name the column Valid Email. And let's double-click the first cell and type equals, then is email, then open parenthesis, D2, and close parenthesis. We can now see that Google Sheets says false, which tells us this is not a valid email address. Now we can copy this cell and paste it into the other cells, or we can apply the autofill suggestion. So we can see valid email addresses are listed as true, and any with issues are listed as false. We can then check the email addresses of these members. Google Sheets lets us sort and filter the values contained in our spreadsheet. Let's select column E, and then select Data from the menu. Now let's choose Create a Filter. We can now see a small filter icon in the column header. This lets us quickly narrow down what is displayed in our spreadsheet. Let's click the icon and change the selection so that only false is enabled. Now let's click OK. We can now see that the spreadsheet is filtered to only show the cells that contain false. This is a great way to focus on certain rows in your spreadsheet. You can now click the filter icon again to change the selection, or we can select Data and then Remove Filter to view all of the cells. Google Sheets has a number of other more advanced features that you can explore. One of these is the Cleanup Suggestions feature that will automatically provide you with recommendations to clean up your sheet. Let's take a look. To view cleanup suggestions, we select Data, then Data Cleanup, and choose Cleanup Suggestions. This feature automatically identifies common errors in your spreadsheet, and we can see in our example, one of the members has been duplicated by mistake. So we can click the check mark at the top to apply all of the suggestions, or you can select Remove for an individual suggestion. So this feature is worth using if you need to clean up values in your spreadsheet. Google Sheets also includes a range of options to present and visualize the data included in your spreadsheet. A great way to get started is by using the Explore feature, which automatically suggests visualization options based on the cells you have selected. Let's take a look. Let's select cells in the status column. And now let's select the Explore option. You'll find this in the bottom right corner of the window. We can see different suggestions provided by Google Sheets. I'm going to select the bar chart to visualize the different membership levels and the number of members at each level. And I can drag this to my spreadsheet. Now, things can start getting messy quickly when we add visualizations to our spreadsheet. So I recommend that you move visualizations to their own sheet. Let's select the chart and click the 3 vertical dots on the top right corner, and then choose Copy Chart. You can create new sheets in your spreadsheet by selecting the plus sign on the bottom left corner. For my example, I already have an extra sheet that I can use, so let's select this sheet. You can then use the keyboard shortcut on your computer to paste the chart. This chart will continue to be dynamic and it will reflect any changes that are made to the other sheet. Let's rename this sheet and call it Summary. And now let's head back to our Members sheet. We can now select the chart and delete it from the sheet. This means we can use the summary sheet for all of the visualizations we want to create. Finally, I want to point out that you can collaborate with others on your Google Sheets. Selecting Share lets you give additional people access to your spreadsheet. This includes view-only access and edit access. Everything is updated in real time as people make changes to your spreadsheet, and there's also a handy version history if anything goes wrong. For more Google Sheets tips, please take a moment to check out the extra resources in the description below this video. The great thing about Google Sheets is that all of your spreadsheets are automatically stored in Google Drive. This means you can access them from any device, including Google's super handy mobile app. How are you going to use Google Sheets? And did you enjoy my tutorial? I'd love to know. Let me know in the comments below. And if you found this video helpful, please like it so I know to make more videos like this one. See you in the next video.